Welcome to the Architect of Resilience podcast, where we explore the secrets of overcoming life's challenges and unlocking unstoppable strength through deep personal conversations and expert insights.
Welcome to another episode of the Architect of Resilience. That's right. You being the architect of your own life, being able to see through and learn how to see through the chaos, the uncertainty, the things that instill fear in our life and hold us back to the tremendous amount of opportunities and beauty within the life that we have around us. And a little bit different contextual layout for our video listeners. The war rig is above me today, not behind me, because I've got the engine that me and my son have been building the last month, a little supercharged stroker that's going to go in there in the backdrop here. So very special episode today with that in mind. I'm really excited today to have on Travis Rogers. Travis is an elite powerlifter. He's someone that I've actually gotten to know pretty well over the last few years with his persevering and driving through what would be a devastating, career-ending, life-altering injury for most people, and being able to see him drive through that with a level of passion and walk out the other end being, a stronger individual, and at the same time, see how much he gives in so many other areas. As a high school teacher, as an artist, he's done for the Barefoot brand and some others for us. He's done some work that has helped contribute to fundraisings for some different areas, and just as a whole, really inspiring individual. So Travis Rogers, true powerhouse in the world of powerlifting, renowned for his incredible strength. He's raised in the heartland. Actually, I'll skip this. I had a few errors in here I was checking this morning. So, so mine says you were born in the heartland of Texas in a small town. Is that correct, Travis?
Definitely. Small town, yes. Texas, no.
I'm telling you, I don't know. All right. So, but everything else is correct as far as remarkable athlete, remarkable individual. And really, really glad to have you on the show today, Travis. Thanks,
Chris, man. I appreciate it. And I appreciate talking to you and getting to know you throughout the years, too, and following all your different inventions and ventures throughout the last couple of years as well. It's been awesome to see and grow and read your works, your articles, and even be featured in a little bit of them myself. So, and of course, at one of the hardest, pivot points in my life, you kind of being there for me and helped me figure out some protocols and necessary steps with not only you, but some of the other members of the Kabuki team. So I think that at a large doing, not necessarily the mental fortitude, but also knowing that you had the people who had your back and wanted to see you get better just as much as you wanted to. So I do appreciate that.
That is an important topic, that one of community. And yeah, so you were the heart of a case study that I used to present these methodologies earlier this year. It was actually at the Swiss Symposium. I had 3 case studies. You were the first one. And I was going through and preparing the slides, and there was seeing so many slides of you with the team as well during the course of this was really, really cool, realizing how much of a team effort it was and the involvement. But a community is really, for me, I often use the word when I'm talking about values, when people talk about what's important in life. And I use this phrase, sense of family, because not everyone is gifted with having a family. And some people have a family that may not have a sense of family. So what's important? What's important is having a community around you that gives you that sense. They really care for you and they're behind you. And that can be, it's important. Talk about that and that journey through, this instance when you were, so background for everybody. Tell everyone what happened, Travis.
I think, for people who don't know me, I've been powerlifting for around a little over a decade now, a little over a decade in the sport. I was mainly a raw and raw with wraps lifter, top 10 for a couple years consecutively. Coming back from one of my biggest raw meets, I want to say this was maybe late January of 2021. 2021, yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I just put up like 1940, 1950 on the platform. Was in a really good spot for the American Pro, and unfortunately had much of that, for lack of a better phrase, taken away from me in an instant. Was something I definitely didn't see coming. So it was just a normal training day in the Bear Cave. It's a gym I own. About at the time was about 4,000 square feet in Salisbury, Maryland, not far from Salisbury College. We've recently expanded to about 7,000 square feet now over the last 2 weeks during Christmas break. But during that time period, it was back to normal training and kind of eyeing the pro and getting ready for that. And I was actually on a not that this has anything to do with it. I was actually out on a transformer bar when it happened, which is one of my favorite bars. I always liked the Kabuki transformer just because of the versatility, but as a shorter limbed lifter, I always got along better with the extended handles. So I commonly use that for most of my auxiliary work. I probably had some of my best PRs on that bar in wraps and raw, but I followed my normal jumps, a normal day working out, and right as I started getting into like my top sets, it wasn't like a PR, it wasn't like I was going for broke or anything like that. On the way up, I'd probably say like 2 inches out of the hole, I had a quad rupture, and the way the doctors explained it once they went in was basically the way shredded chicken or crab meat looks, like a grenade went off inside of my leg. There was just, it wasn't like one where it tears and then it kind of rolls in the sleeve. Like more commonly you'd see more like the image of a bicep tear where it rolls and you can physically see the roll. He said mine just completely exploded. And as soon as that happened, it shifted to my other leg, which almost simultaneously also ruptured. So I had a really rare, unfortunate coincidence of a double quad or bilateral quad rupture, something that many of the nurses and PTs said they'd never see again in the rest of their time working.
Yeah. So for context here, on this case study, I pulled other research as relates to this, and they're not that common. And some success stories was like, an individual returning to normal function at 2 years. It was at being able to return to strength, being able to return to activity. So being able to walk at like 6 months, return to activity at 9 months. And it was 50% of people total never at 1 year still had either pain or stiffness or both. So there was loss of functionality with 50% of people still at 1 year, and 32% of people never returned to play ever. Like these are the case studies comparable to what you went through. Not how am I also going to walk through this and get back on the platform at a high level, which was your goal.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, along the lines of that study, many of them told me, you'll probably walk. Once you return and relearn how to walk, you'll probably walk funny for the rest of your life, and you'll never competitively squat again. Like your days of competing as far as squat, like you might be able to do like bench only for fun, but like as far as competitively push pull or squat, it's pretty much done for.
So how did you handle that mentally? I'm guessing not too well to start with.
No, not too well. At first, because it's like when it first tore, I immediately went into shock. So like by the time the paramedics got there, I was literally on the floor like giggling and like joking around with everybody. Like I was in so much shock, like I couldn't feel anything. And then very similar to a calf injury I had, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago. Prior to that, I had a double calf tear with compartment syndrome. So I started, it almost developed that, like, and that's when all the pain kicked in because of it had, the one that tore so bad had swelled so big, it just didn't have anywhere to go. And it started basically crushing back in on itself. And then that's when they were kind of like, hey, like this isn't like a thing where you're like, oh, I'm going to be out for a month. Like you're good. Like you've done something that's going to like drastically change you for the rest of your life.
Change the course of your life. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Brandon Lilly struggled forever to try to return to lifting from, he had the same thing happen. And
Was his also double?
His was double. Yeah.
Wow.
And he never was able, I mean, he got in and did some lifts again, but basically ended up not being a competitive, power lifter anymore. I'm really happy with what he's doing with his life and how healthy he's living and what he looks like, and his choices are just tremendous. But that was a big thing for a long time, him trying to get back to that level and just couldn't do it, and it resulted in surgery after surgery after surgery from that. But his was the knee. His was the knees, not a detachment of the both quads, I guess. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, my insertion point was like right above, I think where they reattached mine was right above the VMO.
Yeah.
So like I still have a pretty solid, even though my legs have grown back to a pretty good size, I'd probably say I'm still about an inch, maybe inch and a half off from what they were before I tore them. Because I think I had measured them before, because I was starting to get into single ply, so I was measuring myself a lot for briefs, and I think I had gotten to about 29 inches around. And I remember when I got out of the hospital in 3 weeks, they had shrunk all the way down to like 21 and a half. So I mean, watching like almost 7-8 inches of atrophy in a matter of weeks was like, it was wild. It was literally like you felt like you could sit there and watch them shrink. Like it was
crazy.
Unreal. Yeah.
That's crazy. So how did you shift from that perspective of, I'm in a hospital, I have to learn to walk again, I've got a wheelchair, to I'm going to push this and see what I can accomplish? All right, guys, we talk a lot about mental resilience on this podcast, but let's talk about another type of resilience. That's movement resilience. We want to move well, recover better, and do it for life. And it starts with your feet. And you can start today with Naboso. Naboso is a sensory technology company founded by a functional podiatrist. And all their products feature a texture to stimulate, strengthen, and awaken your feet. I use their splay toe spacers and Neuroball to release my feet at the end of every day. They also have these textured recovery socks that feel like a mini massage when you walk around. If you're looking for an effective way to bulletproof your feet, head to naboso.com. That's NABOSO.com and use code RESILIENCE for 20% off.
I think my initial rehab, I did post, like, I think having so much support from the community, like as you mentioned before, like I've given a lot back to the community, especially in powerlifting, and like I host meets and all that good stuff, and I direct, but like I've always given back to the community, always given stuff away. So like seeing that kind of come full circle within very quick, like the first couple days, as I was posting videos of me like trying to get out of bed and like everyone being so positive, really helped me, especially since I couldn't really see like the people at my own gym. It was just more of like online support versus like the people you can see, because unfortunately, like even though COVID had let up, they were only allowing like 1 to 2 written consented people in to see you at the hospital, but you weren't allowed to rotate people. So it was like my mom one day and my wife the next day, and they would rotate who would see me. And that was all I got to see for the whole duration. Besides if like I FaceTimed out of the hospital and stuff. But though I think the one that really did it for me was like my mom had come, like it was my mom's turn to come in like my first day of rehab. So like the first real day where I had tried to like get out of bed. And I had some really awesome PTs and people who worked with me at the clinic that was about 10 minutes up the road. But the guy I had that day he was not it for me, man. I was terrified to begin with. And I was like, I mean, even though I was competing 198, like I was a much bigger 198. Like I'm a stocky 198. So like And
Yeah.
this guy wasn't very big, and I'm like, yo, you're gonna have to like basically carry me. So like I'm a little frightened right now. And of course my mom's watching, and she's like a deer in headlights look, and it's even me like swinging my legs enough to turn them so I can maybe put them on the floor out of the bed. And of course I'm in like full wrap, full braces, full everything. And like just like the look in her face watching me like, and like she knows I'm a very resilient dude. Like I'm a tough dude. Like I can take some shit and be fine. But like watching how uncomfortable I was, not from the pain, because I can take pain, but like the worry in my face, I think is really what got her. Cause like I didn't know if I was just gonna stand and they were just both gonna explode again. So like once you hear that noise, it never goes away. Like I
Oh,
still hear that noise
no.
every time. Um,
Yeah.
and so like standing up, this guy's like kind of like cradling me a little bit, and I'm literally like drifting and sliding like out of bed, and she's worried he's not going to catch me. And they ultimately just like put me back in bed that day. Like they didn't even get me all the way up. And so I think that day was like really hard on her, but seeing how hard it was on her, I was like, dude, I can't put this woman through anything more than I've put her through. Like I gotta get the fuck out of this bed. Like I gotta learn to walk again. If that, but like I think by the seventh day, I was going upstairs with crutches. And they were like, you're not supposed to be able to do this. And I just think something clicked. And I was like, dude, I'm gonna squat again. I'm gonna powerlift again. Like I
Yeah.
wasn't ready to be the guy who was like, back in my day, I used to bench 405. Like I wasn't ready to be the sit back and just only coach. I wasn't ready to be sit back and just be a gym owner. Like I was ready to still represent for my
And
team and like set an
it's fine.
example.
It's fine to do those things and be that.
It
That's
is, and I'm not saying
totally,
it's not. I'm
yeah.
just saying me personally, I was not
Yeah.
ready at age, 32 to be that guy.
Right.
I know that time's coming one day for sure, but I didn't want it to be them. Um, but that was probably one of the most memorable moments, like right off the bat, was doing that, and then like gradually like making it so we could walk like 10 feet down the hallway, turn around and come back and get back in bed, like just little steps until we made it to the rehab facility, where then I really started taking off, making huge progress as far as like practicing stairs, having like the handicap bars, so I could basically like mimic walking but also hold my body weight like in a dip position. And they said one of the biggest benefits of me being a raw power lifter was like my upper body strength was still like insane. So like I could dip, I could carry, I could crawl basically through anything without really getting really tired. So they said if I didn't have that, like I really would have been SOL. Like I wouldn't have had
Yeah.
near as good of recovery.
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember. Like, did you reach out to me or did I reach out to you? Because I don't. At that time, there's a lot of people that knew that I played around in the the peptide world and recovery, but a lot of it was because of my prior career and other stuff. I kept a lot of that stuff kind of quiet for a long time, and
Well,
I don't think I'd
so
really.
I had been talking because back at that point in juncture, I was still working for the USPA. So I was already talking about hosting a movement seminar with Kabuki with Kyle and Brandon.
Yes, I
So I
remember. Yep.
think I think that's how we got tied together a little more, because they were already coming down to my gym to host a seminar, and that was when I first really started working with Kabuki as like one of the pro team athletes. Um, and then kind of like in the midst of all that, probably like it wasn't long. I want to say six, because I was home and I was still in a wheelchair when Kyle and Brandon came, because the pictures of us were all with me in a wheelchair still. I
Yep.
would say that happened about 6 weeks post op when I returned home.
Yeah.
So I think that's how we got talking, because then as I was able to get out of the hospital, then we started talking about making, uh, you know, options as to what kind of supplements, what kind of peptides I could start taking to kind of really navigate this healing process, and kind of some of the studies and protocols you had written up yourself.
Yeah. And for our audience, Travis is one of the, usually my best success with this is local, where I can kind of manage it because there's also some things not available. And Travis was willing to do everything. He got the BFR, he got like all the tools to implement the entire protocol, and was disciplined and followed through with this at a level. Because a lot of times it's, again, you're battling your mind, you're battling all these other things because they're like, you can't do this, but you were deadlifting, in 12 weeks over 600 pounds. Like,
yeah. Yeah, I remember when you reposted
return to
that
the
video.
platform. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think one of the big things too is because I do remember now, Kyle had messaged me some protocols, and then he said, hey, these are some loose ones from Duffin, but let me put you in contact with him so you can get like the full shebang bang, the whole deal, and see everything to see what he thinks. And I think that's how we ended up personally talking, like on the phone and on Zoom. And if you look at my training videos, even though I'm even posting now, I'm still using BFRs in them. Like I still use BFRs like once a week, twice a week.
So this is what people don't understand, is they think that they're going to get some peptides and inject them in a sore spot and it's going to feel better. And maybe sometimes that works. Maybe a lot of times it doesn't. But the protocol that Travis went through, it's published or will be published on my site when this podcast goes live. But really, it's a much larger, comprehensive program because we can actually mechanically stimulate the receptors and growth factor release as well. And it's a matter of hitting multiple pathways that the peptides are also hitting, but in a multiplicative, non-duplicative effect. So the effects start stacking, right? Because the peptides are organizing, the mitochondria, it's causing vasodilation, increasing, like all these activities happen. But at the same time, we're hitting those with supplementation that's doing the same thing, but different pathways. We're doing BFR, but also combining BFR with a type of training that causes oxygen desaturation, which in itself mimics what BFR does or amplifies it. And so I've ended up dubbing the method the amplification method, but honestly, it took 20 years of me like putting this together, which involved creating my own supplements, a supplement company, designing equipment and patents from scratch. Like all this is built around this understanding of these pathways that started, I started playing in this in 2003. And then working with athletes, see what's working, what's not, like reading the research, but not just reading the research, but having a vast level of like tremendously high performance athletes, on the limit. So you can actually see what's working and what's not really fast. And so the output of that, and I don't think I'd quite, like I knew what all it was. And that's, you walked through the process, but realizing like, shit, I actually spent like the last 20 years putting this together. Was an interesting thing. And so, for me, it was great having somebody not just local, but like at a distance, be able to walk through this. And of course, you totaled 2138, like not too long, like within the window of people learning to freaking be able to be released to walk again. Like, I mean, that's.
Yeah, I remember. So fast forward that same mom face that she was watching me like swing my legs over in the bed. The meet I did was a WRPF meet about 3-4 hours away out in Baltimore, called Freaks Come Out at Night. So it was a night meet. It started late. Like we were deadlifting at probably 2-3 in the morning. Fun meet.
Yeah.
But she said like they were, and my mom and dad, they're extremely hard workers. They go to bed early, but she stayed up for just the squats because she was so terrified. So they're watching the live stream from home with like a couple other friends. And she's like, and of course I'm in equipment now. So I was already a slow squatter to begin with, but now I'm like really slow. So she said it felt like an eternity watching me squat those 3 attempts, like 30-second descents, like wondering if I was just going to like explode at any moment. And it was really cool to see like her still be supportive of that, even though like how terrifying and like how traumatic that was to like kind of see me like that. But yeah, I did.
It's just crazy because
21, 38. Yeah.
it's not possible. Like people like what you did like is not in scientific literature, but it's not a story. Like you did it. Like you're standing there and you lifted those weights, and I mean, like it's people don't understand. Like, and this is why I've become passionate about these topics, because the standard of care needs to change. Like you shouldn't have to be finding me to be able to do that when
Yeah, agreed.
the approach, like that's, to me, that's crazy. So I
It's
cut
like
you off there, Side Travis.
it's like you're a hot commodity. You're almost like a black market. You're like, I got to go out and see this guy and talk to this other guy to put me in touch with your email and phone number.
Exactly. And that should not be the way, like
Right.
that should not how be it works. Right. Like that's not it. And because it's like, it works time after time. I told you it was going to work with confidence because I've seen that happen like over and over again. Like
Yeah, it was I mean, I would never wish that on my worst enemy, but now it's like I kind of know what to do, and I actually I followed that same protocol pretty close to it cuz again, unfortunately about three this was rough. 3 months after that, I ruptured my elbow,
yeah,
and I had
I
a
remember.
full medial tricep detachment, and then it had ripped away so hard it like destroyed all the parts around my ulnar, and I think they did 4 pins in a wire. So I got a new elbow that year too. So it was like 10 titanium pins in the course of about a year. Pretty brutal.
Yeah, brutal. So you mentioned that it is, you still hear that sound when you're going down, and I know what that's like. How do you work through that? Because once you have that devastating, I remember when I tore my adductor, I was going down with an 815 squat
I remember
at
that.
and I just heard it rip like a paper bag, and I shot out into the crowd screaming, and it was it's some yeah, that you're going down and you're just like, this could, like, you're just anticipating, but at some point, like, you've got to just start doing it again. Tell me about your process as it relates to this.
I definitely agree with you. I never it's weird when you talk to people who have had it before because there's such a huge difference. Is like they don't understand that sound. Like a lot of people refer to it as like a unzipping sound, or like I've heard them also describe it as like a paper bag or cardboard being torn.
It's yeah, the
Yeah,
paper
it's a
bag is
very
me. So it's just like paper bag shredding. And
yeah,
then of
it's a
course there's
very
the big pop
strange.
when the
Yeah,
tendon goes too. The
yeah,
rubber band. You got the rubber band and you got the paper bag.
yeah.
Yeah.
I got both. All of mine have been rubber bands. Um, but I think when I first really started squatting again, like under a bar, like my first day back with a bar, of course I had like I think I had a 5 man team on me for like a 45 pound bar, which was I mean awesome to see like your crew is that dedicated and like all wanting you to be successful in that way. Um, I had two PTs, like both with doctorates with me. Like I mean, I had the team. Like I had you and Kyle and everybody from afar, but then like my localized team was like the best of the best. Like you couldn't, and most of them were powerlifters. So like these guys weren't just like, oh, you know, the only injuries I see are ACL tears. You know, they're like they've seen our injuries in strongman and powerlifting, so they knew what they were looking at. And I think the biggest part of it is that anticipation. Like as you like break at the hips and you're waiting. It's all weight and it's like you're sweating the entire time. Like I think those are some of the most grueling workouts with the lightest weights I've ever had, not based on CNS fatigue from strength, but from just sheer like emotional stress. Like it's turmoil, like you're torturing yourself going down, like being that scared. Um, and I
A
used to
year and a
be,
half it took
yeah,
me to like where I felt confident going down with where it wasn't a head fuck. Like that's how long it took.
yeah. It's it's weird too because I just did a single ply meet probably October and it went really really well. Like I saved a lot in the tank. Like I didn't want to push it too hard. because I wanted just enough for like a qualifier for this upcoming year. And I used to be the guy when I would compete, like I would wear headphones. I was super zoned out. Like I was in it. I was aggressive. And now like it just, the injury totally changed who I was as a, not only a lifter, like as a person. Like I don't
Yeah.
wear headphones. Like when I am calm, which is not much of the time during the competition because I'm terrified, I'm like cutting up and joking with people in line that I know. Like I'm having a good time. But I remember my buddy Matt, who's now one of my business partners, we're warming up and I'm in a single ply suit and like he's watching me and he's like, dude, like I've never seen you like this. Like, are you okay right now? And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not at all. Like I'm absolutely terrified right now. And I think we were warming up at like 300 keys, like 661. And like I started cutting them all high. I'd never been so scared in my life. And I was like, dude, I'm gonna walk out there and get hurt. And he's like, no, you're not. You're going to be fine. You're going to put your straps up and you're going to do just what we did in training. Like you've been knocking out 700s left and right. Like you're going to be fine. And I just couldn't, it's just so hard to explain to people that feeling where you're moving towards like something you feel that is concrete going to happen. Like I can't describe it. It's like, you know you're going to get hurt, but you're just like simply guiding yourself towards it. And it's just so hard to explain.
I love that, Travis, because it's okay to be terrified. This is the problem that a lot of people have is they're hoping and wishing that the person, God, this would be so much easier if I'm like XX and I wasn't scared of this. I wish I could do that if I wasn't scared, if I didn't have anxiety. And the thing is, all those people that you look to, they experience the same thing, and it's okay. It's not necessarily going to go away. Maybe it's different in graded amounts, but at some point, you're not going to perform better. You're not going to be in like this perfect moment of like, I'm going to go tackle something that's really hard and challenging and just be like, yeah, it's fucking smooth. Like, guess what? We all experience that. We're all afraid. And we need to learn how to step up and be able to walk into that if we need. Like, this is the lesson. And I remember a number of years ago, I was at a meet. And what I'm talking about is not being at a meet. This is anything in life via, your personal family relationship, business deals. Like, it doesn't matter. Career changes, school, I don't care. It's the same thing. But I went out at a meet. And I went to bench press. And I had 630 pounds on the bar. This was back in geared benching days. I was the biggest guy at the meet by far. I mean, I was hundreds of pounds away from anybody. And I took that bar up and I used a, I think it was it wasn't a suicide grip. But I was pressing up and I lost the bar off the back of my hand. So it flipped my fingers backwards and the bar at close to lockout fell. And it fell directly on my face. I saw it coming and the spotters were slow. And so I turned my head and it caught the side of my eyebrow. Luckily, this was at one of Ryan Kennelly's meets and he had this super massive thick bench press. So as the 630 pounds hit my face, my head sunk into the bench and it caught kind of like the bridge of my nose and the side of my face. My elbow was tweaked, my hand was tweaked, and I got up and I'm walking up to the table and everybody's like, "What are you going to do?" Because they were expecting me to go to the hospital or, I was like pulling out of the meet and I'm like, "No, I'm giving them my next attempt." They're like, "What are you talking about?" So I walked up to the table and I called for 650. And no one filmed. I was the biggest lifter at the meet. There wasn't a camera going when I walked up to do my 650 because everybody was terrified of what would happen. But I knew what would happen if I didn't go up there and take that challenge of that meet, that I would be facing that fear for years of being under that bar. And I knew if I stepped to it right fucking then, I could shut that down. Even if maybe I missed the lift. I didn't. I hit 650. and I pushed it to lockout, and I got it done. And it was a record total, I think, of something, because this is back, I was still competing in the drug-free, like, geared days, something that doesn't even exist anymore. So it's probably some record that still stands, actually. And there's not a single film of it, because everybody was terrified of who is this crazy guy stepping up there. But this is the point. Like, yeah, I was fucking afraid. I wasn't, like, without fear. I wasn't disregarding fear by any manner. I didn't put 750 on there and go, oh, I'm just going to be, like, go think I can do something that I don't have the capacity to do. But I walked into that moment of being scared. And, yeah, I was sore for, like, freaking 6 weeks after that. My elbow, like, everything. I was just, like, beat to hell from, well, dropping 630 pounds on my face off the back of my arm. So, anyway.
Dude, yeah, I mean, but there is something to be said about that. Like, a lot of people are afraid to face it in the moment, or assume that, like, other lifters that they look up to never experience those kinds of things. It always reminds me of, like, thing Ed used to say when he did seminars. He would talk to people and they'd be like, well, what's it feel like to squat 1,000 pounds? Or your max to be 1,000 pounds? And he goes, well, what's your max? And they're like, oh, it's 500. He's like, it feels like that. But, like, I think that comparison, like, where other people look at elite level lifters or someone in sports in general, that has just been that's far removed from them just because of their time in something, first years versus a decade in. And they're like, well, they got there because they were never scared. And that's not true. I think a lot of people don't talk about that enough.
Yeah, they're sitting there. I wish I was, so I could handle this well, not afraid like those people. Well, guess what? That's just not the case. So, yeah. So let's change direction a little bit here. Resilience, obviously a key theme. We've talked about this in the physical manner, but what are your non-negotiables in regards to mental toughness in the face of adversity?
And you mean your non-negotiables as far as, could you give me an example?
Actually, that was a very, very poorly worded question. So we'll change that up a little bit.
Okay.
What's the most valuable lesson that you've learned about the concept of strength in general, both physical and mental?
That it's definitely not it kind of makes a full circle back to how we started this conversation with a community type setting. And I know there's so many lifters now that are and I think it's part of that generation of, headphones and pump covers and all that stuff, where a lot of people train like lone wolf style, is like kind of like what I would refer to it as. But, like, they start missing that community aspect. And I think a lot of people who miss that aspect of the sport, because they assume it is so me, is they miss that part that also coincides with your failures and your successes. Meaning, like, when something bad happens as a team, like, you deal with it as a team. And I think that really builds upon your ability to, fight against the odds, to get stronger, to overcome something. Like, I know for a fact that I would have not, number one, been as strong as I was before I got hurt, but definitely not been as strong after I got hurt, without, like, the sense of, like, my gym, my family I've built, the team that me and my wife have built around us. I mean, there's guys that would go to bat for me any single day of the week, no matter what it was. And I mean, to look at somebody and know that they're gonna be beside you whether you make this lift or it puts you back in a wheelchair or worse, that does something for you as far as strength of community goes. And I think those people who are looking to, just blow up virally, just blow up as far as themselves go, I think once they miss that aspect of the sport, it's really detrimental to strength. Because, I mean, look at all the ventures and strides you've made as an athlete, like, given that, you form multiple teams, multiple companies that are all help other people grow in some aspect of community and strength. I think people just generally don't look at our sport in that manner anymore. I think, 20 years ago, it was way different. Many people still looked at it as like there was a group of guys, they came to the meet, they were all together. Their successes were each other's successes. Their failures were what they needed to go back and work on as a team. Like nobody looks at the sport like that anymore.
That's thanks for sharing that. I really think that that's a valuable thing for our audience. Now, you've been through some, we've talked a lot about this one instance, but oftentimes I find that people that have achieved an incredible level in regards to strength or performance in any aspect of their life and overcoming adversity often have, some early challenges or, different types of things that they've been through in their younger life. Has there been anything as far as like uncommon adversity that you've overcome like early in your life?
I would say right as I was getting into lifting, and these two things kind of coincide together. Of course, a lot of people have heard me on like other podcasts or kind of know a little bit of my background story. And actually, next month, January 21st, will be a decade for me being sober and clean. So I struggled with sobriety and drug use during my younger years, way before that I made teaching and community and powerlifting like a forefront in my life to kind of combat those things and kind of keep me on the right path. Um, but as like a drug addict and as like someone who didn't take care of themselves and made very poor choices for their bodies and hobbies, um, I think especially in the beginning of the sport, it was gaining weight for me, and most people wouldn't assume I ever had that problem. But I mean, there's pictures of me. I used to weigh like a buck 25 soaking wet, and
Oh, wow.
I'm 225 now at the same height, 5'5". So I mean, like at the height of that, I mean, I looked very like your stereotypical user. Like I was very small, skeletal frames. Like there wasn't a lot to me. If the wind blew hard enough, it might take me away. But
Yeah.
I think I struggle with that a lot. Um, but also the fact that those sort of people, which powerlifting attracts people with addictive personalities, no matter what they're addicted to, because it's another source of adrenaline. It's something to put their time and effort in.
Raise his hand.
um,
Yeah.
but I think there's a really dangerous side to that in powerlifting too that doesn't get talked about, just because it's almost like swapping one addiction for another. And in some sense, that's when you see people start to, quote unquote, like overtrain and then not take care of themselves in the, if you have addiction and, drug use on the far left and you have overtraining and like just balls to the wall all the time on the far right, they can't establish that happy medium because of that addictive personality and because they don't understand that it is indeed a trade-off. And so I think that's one of the other things I struggled with early on as well. Is like I didn't know where to draw the line because it was so new and it was taking the place of something that was also just as extreme.
That's some really valuable insights. And it's really important to understand where these things fit within the scope of how you want to live and the way that you want to live, that you are not a power lifter. Powerlifting, or whatever it is an expression, a way for you to express yourself, just like you express yourself with your art pieces. You are not the art piece per se, but you are the person that creates this, and this is a way that you embody and show people, how you want to live. Now, in this process, thinking through that, your earlier life and, things that you've been through in this environment with your successes in the strength game, the injuries that you've overcome, has that impacted at all your views of what strength means? How would you define strength?
Definitely. And again, touching on like what we just talked about, where you develop that inability almost to establish between two extremes. Once you discover, you can do this certain thing a certain way and get infinitely better at a much faster rate than, say, other people. Like you just, you decided that, I'm actually pretty decent at this hobby, and it makes you want to take it that much further. I think for those first couple years too, as I started kind of like making my ranks as like, and this was early, I was competing still, 181 drug free, for all those years. I don't think I was untested until I went into 198, which was at least, I want to say till 20, I think first nationals I did in Vegas might have been 2017, maybe 2018. But I think when you have that far side where you understand you can get better at it, and people start taking notice of you and you feel good about yourself and you start getting more attention in a non-negative way, because of course as like someone who's a recovering addict or an addict, like you get most of your attention in a negative way, like this dude's fucking crazy, he can't control himself. Like you get attention in that avenue versus it's like a kid. Like, I mean, I teach high school. Like if you can't get attention in a positive way, you'll act out towards an adult until they give you attention, because attention is attention, right? And kids can't establish the different. And as an addict, you're basically a giant child. Let's be real. Because you can't understand those responsibilities and take ownership of what you're doing. Which can largely relate in anything you take to that extreme level. So I think my first couple years are vastly different than my latter. As I think I was still selfish. Like I was still doing this for me. And then like as I progressed, as I became a referee, as I became, random people reaching out to me and being like, hey man, like I like what you're doing. I see what you're doing with the kids. Like, and then I developed, the charity and the foundation and started doing it for the community and getting, hand-me-down, gear and wraps and all kinds of stuff for the kids and taking them to meets. It really changed who I was and who I thought I should be in the sport. It was no longer about you want to be recognized for the top 10 or the whatever, the all time in the world. It was more, I want to be recognized for the dude that's like, hey, that's that guy that takes his kids to the meet. That's that guy that like does all this stuff. Like, and I talked about this really recently with a couple of friends, because it was honestly not a relief, but surprising to me that I made it back in the top 10 this year in single ply. Because I assumed like with injuries, I would skip a year, I'd be like up in the top. I'd have to take a year or two off and then kind of rebuild that. But somehow I'm back in there, and me and my friend Tim Brown got talking about it. He's like, dude, it's so crazy to like watch how you've changed as a person and like what you do for other people. Because, and I told him, I said, I stopped doing this for me a really long time ago. Like it became so much more than that. And even coming back from the injuries and still doing meets, it wasn't about me. It's like, do you want to set an example for the people that have helped you? Do you want to set an example for the community and what you're building and like the legacy of your gym and like what you're trying to do and the people that read your articles and watch your videos? And like, it just became so much more about helping people than what the fuck I was doing on a platform, even though that was part of it. And it just truly changed my whole outlook. And it wasn't, I didn't want to be the guy, the man with the big total. I just wanted to be like the fucking man.
Architects, if you want to build more physical resilience in your life, you need to start with a firm foundation. That's why I only wear barefoot shoes. Their wide toe box, zero drop heel, and flexible frames allow me to comfortably strengthen my foot every day while promoting optimal body mechanics, postural alignment, and movement. Listeners can get 10% off by using the code RESILIENCE at barefoot.store. That's BEAR foot.store for 10% off with code RESILIENCE. Start improving how you move today with barefoot shoes. Yeah. It's crazy when you're earlier in your career and you're like, I just can't wait till I hit XX numbers, and then you do it and it feels great. but then you coach somebody and they achieve it, or somebody comes to you and says, I did this in my life because of what you said or what you've done, how much more powerful that is to you than anything that you did as far as those personal accomplishments. When it was change that you affected in someone else is so vastly more rewarding than achieving, those things yourself as an individual. And I find that so fascinating.
And I got to ask you this question, because I mean, obviously, I don't know this avenue of it, but you would, as an inventor, like, and also of course, like you coach and all that stuff, but as an inventor, like, how cool must that be for like that same kind of thing you just talked about, but as an inventor, like someone coming to you and be like, Chris, because of your invention, like I could bench again for the first time pain free. Like I could do this when I wasn't supposed to, or I couldn't before. Like that's got to be a different type of feeling.
Yeah, it's really cool when people that you know and respect are out there and they're like, you have changed, training. You've trained sports performance with your, like, that is for the better. And that is, I don't know. It's just, it's really hard to understand. It's weird being, still at the same time when it comes to lifting and those other things. I'm like, I'm irrelevant anymore. But my relevance is in other areas. And that's, at the end of the day, that's like the thing that I wrote on my wall 8 years ago. This is before completing grand goals, basically around the same time of establishing that. That was a subset, but I wrote down that I wanted to change the face of fitness, not just the gym, but all the way through with its integration with clinical care. And people ask me today, they're like, what's your next big grand goal? What's the next one? I'm like, it's that. They're like, no, what's the big lift? I'm like, no, the lift, like that was one small aspect of like showing people like, hey, I believe in walking the walk. Like, you have principles around training, you have principles around what you do, you research, but you go do it. Like, that's your learning practice. And to be able to inspire people like, hey, you can achieve things that people don't even believe are possible, just like your recovery. Like, if you just put enough focus, enough intensity and effort behind it, you can bring to the world things that you yourself can say, that's impossible, but I did it. And that's what that was about, was showing people that it wasn't like, if I wanted to lift more weights, I would have said, let's squat 1,050, like, or whatever.
Right.
I could have done that. Like, so I think people have that disconnect, and also just like throwing you in boxes externally. So when you get that recognition outside of the box that a lot of people throw you in is valuable. And so it's like, yeah, I am more than just this facet of these things that people see. And I think that's cool. So sorry, I went on a few different tangents.
No. I mean, I asked the question I wanted to hear, man. And like, as somebody I look up to and admire, like, to hear you say, like, positive and kind things about me, it means a lot, man.
Well, like, you walking through this and me being part of that was so valuably rewarding for me. Like, that experience is greater than many of the feats that I accomplished. Like, yeah, you got that elation when you're standing on stage and you've been training for months, but it's just a number. It's just like, I showed up and, I did my thing. It's very, very different knowing, God, I worked with Travis at a point, like, his life could have gone in a completely different direction, both mentally and physically. And he did the work, he walked through all of that. But as a guide and a mentor, I was there and I was part of that journey. And that's really fucking cool.
Well, I'm certainly glad you were, because you're right. It definitely could have gone in a vastly different route.
Yeah. Speaking of things going in a different route, we're getting close to the end, and I one of the things that you're involved in both the charity aspect and as a meet director, and very involved in the sport. What do you believe are some significant changes that have happened or opportunities that will be the sports facing today?
Good question. Good question. Um, that's funny because like I've had people recently ask me this, and I don't always talk about it because I am under a lens sometimes just because I do work for specific federations or different aspects in companies. Um, but I mean, I am glad you asked that, like, because I do have certain feelings about things. I think one of the big things is I was the referee chairman for the WRPF for a little while, for about a half a year when it was first breaking out after the USPA kind of had like the big thing happen. Um, I think one of the big things that would set apart, and this doesn't have to be WRPF, this could be any federation, because I just saw, I believe they just released APO, which is like the state's version of WPO. I just saw that pop up the other day. Um, but I mean, it got me thinking about this very question you were asking, just because I saw comments and people flooding in already. Oh, another Fed, just what we need. You know what I mean? Like, and people act like that, but and me personally, as somebody who was writing those referee tests and writing some of the exams, like people who are interested in staffing and actually giving back and working to the sport, I think a higher standard needs to be held for those things. So that way you hold your referees accountable, and that way your competitions and meets across the country are much more recognizable and a much more stringent set of rules where it is more cohesive, and you don't see, hey, don't go to this meet, the judging's too lax, or don't go to this meet because the judging's too tight. And I think that's where you have fundamental breaks, not only in feds, but then you also have fundamental breaks in, directors. I think, and that's something I've said for a long time. Like, I guarantee, like, my community, my people, like, no matter in the tri-state area, like, it doesn't matter if I'm SPF, WRPF, USPA. Like, if you come do a meet with me, it's going to be a good meet, and my team is going to try their damnedest to make sure you have a great time, that everything's safe, that it's a way a meet should be. And that's why you have so many people that say, support the community, don't support the Fed. And we have a
Yeah,
lot of people that chant that because it's very true.
it's
Because you
true.
do have
It's true.
too many break-offs in different directions. And I'm still amazed at some of the referees, like, they will put on large live stream events where it's like basic rules and fundamentals of rule books where they don't know. Like, I've seen an instance they had somebody stop somebody for like tape on their fingers at like a national level event. I've seen like, and stuff that was blatantly written in a rule book that other people on a live stream, if you knew the rules, would be like, yo, there's literally a judge in a chair at a national event that doesn't know the rules. Like, I mean, and that's not a good look for any Fed.
No.
So I mean, I think it just needs to be more cohesive, and I promise that's not me talking shit on Feds, on talking shit on specific people. It's just as a fact, like, if you want this sport to grow, if you want it to make it to a bigger platform, onto TV more, onto everything more, like, it has to be more cohesive. It has to stop being so broken and allowing people to go this way or that way because you say you want it to grow. So that means you're more lax with who you're letting in. If you're not qualified to do something, don't let them be qualified to do something, because that's segmenting the sport.
Yeah. That's a lot of issues with that incident years in the past here too. Yeah, it's the quality control of the people involved. And I agree. Like, support your community, support the, directors that are doing great stuff. It doesn't matter at the end of the day what federation that they're going with. That's, good people put on good events and they have good people associated with them. Like,
And honestly,
that's
most of the directors that are doing meets like that, including myself now, are moving towards hosting multiple Feds, working for not a singular Fed, not being associated with one Fed. And you're going to see, I guarantee this, and I'll call it right now if it's not already happening or people don't realize it, you're going to see a decline in high level qualified people taking state chairs, taking referee chairman, taking jobs that solidify them as a name with a personal Fed, because they don't want to be involved in that level. They just want to do good for the sport and the community.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I used to be a chair for the APF, and my business partner was a chair for the gosh darn, I can't remember. There was another one, and we both hosted meets through the year. So I would compete at the ones that he hosted, and vice versa. And everybody knew, like, he's just like, we hosted, and then we had USPA meets. We had like, but everybody knew if there was a meet that we were hosting, we hosted meet for about 10 years. It was going to be phenomenal. They were going to be rocks. They were going to be like, you were not going to find a better run meet. And there must have been, 4 different federations that we would float through. Didn't care. I was a fed of, I was a chair of a fed, so on. Like, it just, but yeah, at the end of the day, those are just certifying bodies, and they're not, just because that title is such doesn't mean a meet is going to be a certain way either. So
yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Definitely. So, I mean, if circling to your question to kind of close it off, like, if there's something I would really like to see in regards to like our sport and pushing that boundary, it would be like the more cohesiveness, the more raising the limits of who you're letting doing what, and being okay with there being fewer people doing it. Like, I think that's the thing. Like you talked about, like, instant. Hey, we need to grow the sport. We need more referees. We need more chairmen. We need more this. But it's instant. It's not saying, hey, let's pick the best ones. It's saying, hey, we need to grow this fast for money, so we're going to grab anyone. Like, It needs to be an upper level thing.
Yep. Right. Well, that's probably a good point to start closing this out. So where can people find you at, Travis? Learn more about your gym, what you're doing, the charity. Like, give us a rundown.
So my 501c3 gives back to underprivileged children. You can find and it goes to the school district and the food pantry as well. We usually always do winter clothes and backpack drives. A lot of people know me for that. This year, we've strictly been doing food to the food pantry, and has been an all-time need right now, especially with longer breaks in winter, Thanksgiving, even summer. We have food trucks that deliver the food. I take huge hauls from Amazon. We've already done almost $8,000 this year alone. All that you can find on my personal Instagram at Papa Bear Rogers. In my link bio tree, it's got my big cartel store that I sell all our merchandise. From meets, from me personally, from the foundation, from me and my buddy Matt's new travel company called Outlawed Powerlifting. Big portions of that money go back to the food pantry. We do things for the Special Olympics. Like, you can count if you're putting money in that store. And that's why everyone say, why do you post receipts? Why do you do this? Is it to show it off? It's not to show it off. It's to show you your money is going to the place it needs to go. And I'll never be afraid to say that. Yeah. So I think Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, anybody that doesn't know, 503C also has public disclosures. So if you've ever got any questions about people who are raising money, make sure that they do have a 503C in place. And so if you want, you can go dig and find the details on that. So
and then
unfortunately,
all that stuff is ours. And then my gym page is linked to that. We're in Salisbury, Maryland, about 10 minutes from the college. We're real close to the mall. We always do drop-ins if you ever want to check it out. And of course, my meet schedule is, of course, posted that both my away meets, where me and Matt are traveling with the Outlawed trailer to set up at the tri-state area around here, and then also our home base meets for the cave.
All right. Love it. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, man. I really appreciate it, Chris. Thank you so much.